Hi, I'm Amanda Bennett, the new owner of Blaines Art Supply. In just a moment, you're going to meet a very good friend of mine, the former owner of Blaines Art, Dave Haag, where he will talk about his history with the store, who he is as an artist, and what's next for his future. Hello, Dave.
Hi. This is different.
Yeah. So tell me about the history of Blaines.
It is long and varied, and I only represent a part of it. A lot happened before I arrived on the scene, but my history with Blaines started in 1990 when I walked in and asked to see the manager, and they said Renee's upstairs in her office. And so I went up and asked her for a job. And she said no. But she said they weren't hiring at the time. And so I proceeded to leave her office and went out and talked to the rest of the staff because I was kind of trying to decide whether that was somewhere I wanted to work. But I had bought art supplies there when I was in high school. So I knew that Blaines was kind of the epicenter of art in Anchorage. And because I had always been, interested and involved in art, and I kind of wanted to get back into it when I moved back up here, Blaines was the place to go. So that was my reason for being there. But it was funny because later on, Renee said that she wasn't going to hire me because I spent too much time talking to the staff. They weren't getting anything done. And I actually went back, I think, 3 times before she hired me. So I came back a couple weeks later and said, well, are you guys hiring now? And she said, well, no, but I'll let you know if we have a position available. I said, okay. And my night job was I was driving limousines for Touch of Class limousine service. And so I would work all night long. And but I was, free during the day, and, I was young and hungry and wanted to make more money. So the 3rd time was a charm, and she hired me probably just to make me go away. Or not to go away, but make me quit bugging her. But and that was where it started. And we worked together for a couple of years. We were great friends. And actually, at the time, she was married. She was working as a photographer, kind of semi-professionally. I mean, she was very accomplished as a photographer, and that's where most of her training was. And prior to Blaines, she had managed Kit's cameras. So when she hired on with Blaines, she had no experience in art supplies at all, but she made it her mission in life to learn about them. And so but she was a good manager, and that was the most important thing, that she was good at managing people and ordering, which was vital for Blaines. But she was a person that when she puts her mind to something, there's no stopping her. She was very goal-oriented, and so at the time that I knew her, she was planning a trip to Russia. And so as soon as Russia opened up, period, she had gone a couple of years prior to Magadan with a group of photographers, and they photographed in the Magadan area, and she decided that she wanted to see the whole country. And so she had planned this trip to go back. She flew to Magadan, bought a car, and drove literally across the entire country of Russia, from Magadan to Moscow. And during that time, I think they had to rebuild the engine in the car like 3 times. It was a Zhiguli, which kind of sounds funny when I think it was probably pretty jiggly to drive because, I mean, most of the roads weren't paved, but 10,000 miles she drove and photographed the whole way. And so at the time I was working at Blaines, and we had a map of Russia that we kept on the wall. And every time we would get a postcard or a letter from Renee, we would put a push pin on the map, and we kind of tracked her progress.
Oh, it's so cool.
And then at the time when she went on this trip, I had applied to be manager in her stead, but I was turned down because Regina had been an employee there for 15 years, I think. She was more senior, and so they moved her into that slot, which, was fine. I had no problem with it. But unfortunately, about 3 months into it, Regina was diagnosed with lung cancer, and she went into the hospital and never came out. So Renee had to come home early from her trip. It was just very tragic, and we ended up losing Regina 6 months after she was diagnosed, so it was very, very fast. But after that trip, Renee kind of ended up going through a divorce, and her and I were both single at the same time, and we were planning the very first Save Art Fair, when we did the big mural, and something happened, and boom, it was on, and we got together and never looked back. And so in 1998, John was, so John and Greg were running the store. We had 2 locations at that time. There was one on International Airport Road, and that was the commercial paint store and the frame shop. And then all the fine art supplies were at the store at 2803 Spenard Road. And when the big box hardware stores came to town, Blaines was just a small independent and couldn't compete. And so they closed the paint store and moved the frame shop back to the Spenard location. And John was kind of just selling down the inventory with the idea in mind that they were going to shut down and go there. Greg and John were both musicians. So John played the bass and Greg played the saxophone, and they actually performed at our wedding reception. Their band, I think it was called After Six. So they wanted to pursue their musical careers and just shut down Blaines and call it a day. And Renee said, well, wait a minute. What about selling it? And they said, to who? And she said, to me. And so they said, well, if you can do it. And so she made it her mission in life. Like I said, she's goal-oriented. When she gets something in her head, she's going for it. And she got an SBA loan, and in 1998 we bought the business, and within, I think, 3 years, it was 3 years later, she had it paid off. So, and then by 2008, 10 years into it, she was ready to move because the old location was old. I mean, the plumbing, the wiring. You would cook in the summer, you would freeze in the winter, but most importantly, it was split level. So there was an upstairs, downstairs thing going on, and people just wouldn't go upstairs, period. So upstairs always did poorly compared to the downstairs, and she always knew that if the store were all on one level, that it would increase sales. So that was what we embarked on, and we looked all over Spenard for an existing location, and nothing really filled the bill. There was nothing that kind of fit, And we didn't want to move too far from the original location because, the farther you go, the more customers you lose. People are used to coming to that part of town to go to Blaine. So just by chance, we found that lot right behind the Buckaroo Club, and it was available. So we bought it. I think it was $400,000 was for that little bitty lot, which was a lot. A lot for a lot, but it was the perfect location because the original location was in the Buckaroo Club building, kind of where Pizza Olympia is now. The second location was right next door, so this made perfect sense, right behind there. So we hired an architect and a builder and did all the planning. Originally, the original front entryway was going to be arched. And I have some of the old plans, and it was so cool looking, but arches are expensive. And as we got further into it, it kept getting more and more expensive. And in the meantime, there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. Renee was part of the North Star Business Association, which was fighting the municipality on improving Spenard Road because they had botched it so terribly when they did Arctic Boulevard that none of the businesses wanted that to happen to Spenard because 40% of the businesses in that Arctic corridor went out of business when they did that road upgrade. So they fought the Muni tooth and nail. So when she started building the new building, they threw every code in the book at her. They were every zoning ordinance, anything. They just threw the book at her. So with each new Title 21 ordinance, the building got smaller and smaller, the parking lot got bigger and bigger, and it was just, it was a minor miracle that the store was even built in the first place. It really is. And not the least of which was before a single board went up, they found contamination in the groundwater. And that was from the municipality had owned a vehicle maintenance facility on that site. And I think it was built not long after World War II, and it was there until the 80s when they tore it down. But what they didn't do when they tore it down was remove two 4,000-gallon fuel tanks that were buried there. One held diesel, one held gasoline. The diesel tank leaked into the groundwater. So they had embarked on a cleanup, I want to say in the early 90s, and then they sold the lot to a guy named Barney Seiler. He found the diesel contamination. The Muni bought the lot back, they just wanted it to go away. So they bought the lot back, they did a cleanup of the site, and then we came along and bought it. And when they were doing some geosampling before putting in the foundation for the new building, they found diesel floating on the water table. Well, they shut down the project. The same guy at the ADEC that had given it the clean bill of health to the Muni revoked that and said that we needed to clean it up. So for the next 2.5 years, we fought the municipality on whose responsibility it was. It's like, you guys contaminated it. Why do we have to? And they said, no, we're not cleaning that up. So it was an ugly affair, and it took about 2.5 years. And ultimately, one of Renee's good customers came in, whose husband just so happened to be an environmental attorney who had worked on the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And he also happened to be the only environmental attorney in Anchorage that wasn't on retainer with the municipality. So Tim Patumino stepped up to the plate and said, I'll represent you. And we essentially said, look, we're not paying to clean this up, you guys are. And the Muni fought and fought and fought. We ultimately went to arbitration, although Tim wanted to go to trial because he knew he'd win. But we just wanted to get the building done. I mean, it had taken over our lives. We would eat, sleep, and drink Blaines and what to do about this mess. And ultimately, we went to arbitration. The arbitrator, the judge, found in our favor. The Muni had to pay for the cleanup. and they hauled off over 1,000 tons of contaminated waste from that site to be remediated and then returned. And we built the building. But it was, like I said, it was a minor miracle. So much happened. And, you know, so the building went up in 2011. We moved, we hired 2 U-Haul trucks and just did a round robin because it was right up the alleyway. I mean, it seems kind of silly when you think about it that we needed a truck, but you couldn't really carry this stuff over there. So we would load up a truck, drive 100 yards over to the new building and unload it. And I mean, there was 50 years worth of stuff in the old building. And Renee was never really very good at throwing anything away. So there was a lot of stuff. And I remember the staff at the time, and Georgia was there then, so she's one of the only staff that was working there then. And she would say, "What should I do with this?" She'd come up to me, you know, and she's like, "What should I do with this?" And I was like, "Throw it away." She's like, "Are you sure?" You know, and I said, "Yeah, I'll take responsibility. If Renee says anything, I'll take the heat." She's like, "You sure?" And I'm like, "Throw it away. Get rid of it." I mean, and there was so much, I mean, old displays, I mean, tons and tons of old displays and spinner racks. I mean, dozens of spinner racks that, you know, I mean, you don't reuse those. But we got moved. And we were putting up gondolas and shelves when the concrete was still green. I mean, I don't even think the paint was dry in there. Because during the time, the building, because of the big delay, John had sold the old store to James, who owned House of Hobbies. And so they owned the building, and he kind of doubled our lease payments, you know, our lease amounts, because he wanted us out of there. He wanted to move his store in. And, you know, during that 2.5-year period, 2008, Obama got elected, the real estate bubble burst, and the stock market tanked. So all of our investments were worth about half of what they were at the beginning. So we had to finance a lot more to put the building up. But we were so heavily invested at that point, there was no turning back. You know, it was kind of, we were past the point of no return. We had to just keep driving forward. And I remember talking to one of the assembly members. I think it might have been Dick Traney. I can't remember it now, but I think it was. And I was saying, "You guys need to do right by her and build this and let her build this building. This whole thing with the contamination is ridiculous." I said, "Do the right thing, clean up the mess, let her build her building." And he's like, "Oh no, we can't do that. It's in the legal department's hands now." And I said, "Well, you're dealing with a stubborn Montana farm girl, and she's not going to go away." Well, he kind of poo-pooed me, and then a year later, when the building was built and we were having our grand opening, he was there, and he just kind of sidled up next to me, and he goes, "I should have listened to you." I said, "Yeah, you should have," because she didn't go away, and she was determined to make that happen, and it did, and that was 100% Renee. That was who she was and what she was about, and it was as much for the art community as it was for her in the business. She felt really strongly. I mean, owning Blaines wasn't just, you know, a business owner situation. She was a part of something even bigger than herself, which was the whole art community in Anchorage. She was all in 100%, which is why she was involved in so many different organizations, whether they were nonprofits, charitable, the school district, scouting, you name it. I mean, she was involved with everything because, you know, she believed, as do I, that the community that supports the business, you have to give back. You can't just take. You have to be a member of the community. And I think that's why Blaines is still around. I think that's one of the reasons for, you know, our success as a business is that people see that, you know, you can't fake it and you can't hide it, you know. And I think people recognize that, you know, it comes from the heart. That the Blaines is all about artists, and it's all about the community, and that's why we're still here. And that's why now you are a part of that, which I am super excited for. So. When Renee got cancer, it was devastating, obviously, for her personally, for me personally. It was a very difficult time for the business, and that was not long after you were hired. I think you were one of the only people that was ever hired right off the sales floor. Did you even fill out an application?
No.
I don't think you did.
I had moved to town, I went shopping, and I left with a job an hour and a half later.
Well, and I don't know if you knew this or not, but not long after Renee hired you, she confided in me that she was like, I really think that Amanda is somebody that might someday, at the time she was thinking, that hopefully someday could manage the store. So she was thinking small then. She was thinking manager. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was pretty awesome. I think you really are the only person that's never filled out an application that was hired right off the sales floor. Mm-hmm. Which is, you know, fast forward to now, mm-hmm. It seems fitting to me. But we've endured so much in a relatively short time. You know, I know that the old store went through the '64 earthquake, and that, I'm sure, was devastating then. You know, I remember the permit for the boiler at the old store was issued by the Territory of Alaska in 1957. So, so that block building survived the '64 quake, a couple of cracks here and there. But we survived losing Renee, which was, that right there was, I had no idea what I was going to do. You know, as you know, I was working for the railroad and kind of had to drop everything and focus on the store. And thankfully, you were there. And if you hadn't been there buying for the store, I don't know what we would have done, because I simply did not have the time to place those orders. They took an enormous amount of time, and as you know, Renee was, she was always busy too, so she would wait until we needed, you know, a humongous order, and she would place like ginormous orders all at once. And besides the fact that it would be a huge chunk of money that would come out of Blaines, at the same time the staff would be overwhelmed with freight that came in, and it took forever to enter all that stuff. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do.
Yeah, I didn't ask permission. I just found passwords and started.
Well, and I'm glad you did, because I was having a hard enough time just identifying, you know, who we owed money to, you know, finding passwords on my site. I spent months sleuthing passwords and you know, codes and administrating, and it was, at the same time, so many of our customers were like, what's going to happen to Blaines? What's going to happen with Blaines? And I'm like, just relax. We're not going anywhere. It's going to take a little while to figure it out. And it did. But in the end, you know, we did figure it out, thanks to you and Georgia and Rhonda and, you know, and Brent, to so many other, you know, key staff members that helped keep the wheels on the bus while we transitioned. And then the earthquake hit. Boom, the 7.2. And I'm going, oh my God. And I knew we had earthquake insurance, but I didn't realize what our deductible was. So that ended up costing the business quite a bit. And then, you know, a couple years after that, a pandemic. I mean, who predicts these things? You know, it was, and we survived that, mostly because I have always kept all the money in Blaines. It didn't come out, you know, I wasn't buying boats and, you know, vacation homes, you know, it just kept funneling the Blaines money back into the staff and into our, you know, upgrading things like the computers and the windows and the lighting, everything, you know. And so that helped us get through COVID. Amazingly, I hope we never have to do anything like that again. That was, I can't tell you how much I stressed over that. I was up nights for weeks trying to figure out, one, how long it was going to last, and you know what we were going to do if we weren't able to reopen. Laying off the whole staff was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But at that point, I was worried about Blaine's survival, period. And I didn't really know what was going to happen or how long it was going to be. And we still, of course, had a huge loan that was owed to the bank for the construction of the new building. So that was kind of hanging above my head, and yeah, that was tough. But we made it through all that stuff. And now, you get to stay up at night worrying about it.
I'm so excited to do that too.
Well, you know, I'll say this though. It is deeply fulfilling, and it is not just a job. I mean, it really is like a vocation. And there is an enormous amount of respect in this community for Blaines, and that has been earned, and you earn this opportunity. You've worked your butt off for, you know, I mean, we started this plan, you know, 6 years ago, and never wavered. We've had a few bumps along the way, but nothing worthwhile comes without, you know, some hard work and some headache. But I'm really excited for you. I'm excited for the future of Blaines.
Thank you. Me too.
And I'm excited for what happens next for me personally.
Let's get into that, because everybody's going to want to know. Dave, what's next?
What's next? Well, as you know, Idaho is beckoning. You know, it's funny because when I moved back up, you know, my father got stationed here in 1975. I was 12. And in 1989, I came up for a visit and knew I wanted to be here, and I moved back up in 1990. I came up with 3 suitcases and never left. And for me, it was the best thing I ever did. It was the right place for me at the right time. This was exactly where I needed to be. And I have done everything Alaskan you can think of. I mean, I have enjoyed it all. Hunting, fishing. I built a cabin in the middle of nowhere, snow machining, snow sculpting, ice sculpting, you know, just everything that Alaska has to offer I have enjoyed, you know, richly. But the winters are getting kind of long, and this is a lot of house to maintain, and being here, you know, by myself it's more than I want. And so when I found, after Renee died, and you may remember that it was about a year after she passed that I retired from the railroad, and I just bought a plane ticket, a one-way ticket to Seattle. I went down, rented a car, and just started driving.
Oh yeah.
I spent 5 weeks on the road, just clearing my head and mourning, because I really hadn't had a lot of time for that right after she passed, because there was so much to do. There was the business, there was my railroad career, I had 2 geriatric dogs to take care of, I had so many things. to deal with that I hadn't really had a good chance to sort it all out. And so that trip was very cathartic. That was where I came to terms with losing her, and it was where I came to terms with God on how I felt about it, you know. And on that trip, I literally, the car that I rented was a brand new Murano, I think, and it had 500 miles on it. And when I turned it back in 5 weeks later, it had almost 6,000 miles on it. I drove through Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana. I mean, no map, no plan. I didn't even use my Google Maps. I would just drive, you know. What's over there? Oh, let's go see, you know. I mean, literally, I'd call friends and family in different towns along the way to let them know that I was going to be there. But I would only call them like maybe 8 hours ahead because I didn't want to have a plan. And if people were busy or if they had things going on, I didn't want to impose. It was just like, oh, you got something going on? No problem. I'll just go somewhere else or stay somewhere else. I mean, I slept out on the prairie a couple of nights, just parked the car and rolled out the sleeping bag, and sometimes I stayed in hotels, sometimes I stayed with friends, sometimes with family, but it was, on that trip, I stopped and saw my friend Bob Munson in Meridian, Idaho, and right down the street from his place was a real estate office. And I just wandered in to see what was available and met a guy named Mike Malach who owned Four Seasons Realty in Meridian. And we hit it off instantly. I mean, we just got along great. And so I said, well, I'm really interested in property here. Can you send me listings? And I kind of gave him the parameters. I wanted waterfront, I wanted minimum of 5 acres. Send me what you got. And he sent me listings for months. I looked at different listings until I found the place and suite. And so I flew down to check it out, instantly knew I wanted it, made an offer. He called me back and said somebody else made a bigger offer, and I went, oh, okay, well, it must not be the right place. 3 weeks later, he called me back and he said they couldn't get the financing, their offer fell through. You were the first one that made an offer. Do you still want it? And I said, yes, I do. So I bought some land in Idaho, and you know, it's a 4-season climate. It's a lot like Alaska. It still has a lot of wild country, good hunting and fishing, a lot of recreational opportunities, and I don't think I'll need to own a snowplow or a snowblower. I know it snows there a little bit, but you know, I can deal with that. But 8 months of winter, kind of done with that. So that's the plan. That's the plan. And, you know.
You're building a house this spring?
I hope so. Yeah. So, and actually, you know, our whole kind of 5-6 year plan worked out perfectly because, you know, after COVID, as you know, supply chain issues were, you know, it was very difficult. The housing market kind of tanked. I mean, there were so many things that happened that made it not a good time to build. So the fact that it took us a little bit longer to work out a deal for Blaines turns out to be perfect because the market has now stabilized. You know, the supply chain has caught up with demand. And so I'm ready to build. And I've never built a house before. I mean, I built a cabin, but I've never built a house, you know, from the ground up. And so this is a new thing, a new challenge. And I'm excited about it. To just basically come up with a wish list and then see if I can afford it. You know? But yeah. So you'll have to come down and visit once it's done. So And it's a really beautiful spot. I can see myself spending more time painting. I've been kind of neglecting my artwork the last few years, and it's time to get back into it. So.
Oh, that's perfect. That leads me to the next question. I'm going to talk about you as an artist.
Dave the artist. I honestly think I was born an artist. I have always looked at the world in a different way than most other people around me. My older brother Mike nicknamed me Spaceman back in the day when we were in high school because, and they called my bedroom the Museum of the Weird because I had so much, I was just interested in all kinds of weird stuff, you know. But when I was in grade school, we had a new teacher and she was really into the arts. And she was the first, she introduced me to an art gum eraser, something I had never seen or heard of before, which I spent many hours sculpting into all sorts of little things, tanks and airplanes and people and stuff. But that was when I really started drawing a lot. And I always had problems with my ears when I was little. And so I didn't hear a lot of what was going on in class. So I was literally in my own little world. I would sit there and draw and draw and draw and draw because I didn't hear what was going on most of the time. And so we were sent out on a field assignment to go out into the playground and find something to draw. And the whole class went out. We all went in our own little spots to draw. And almost all of the pictures that people drew were of, you know, trees and the swing set and, you know. And for whatever reason, I found an old crumpled up box of Cool cigarettes. And that's what I drew. And my teacher thought it was fantastic. And I think I still have that drawing somewhere, but she was so proud of me, and it was up on the board, and it was like, I never got up on the board for anything scholastically, so to actually have one of my drawings up on the bulletin board was pretty awesome, and that kind of sent me down a path, and never looked back. And when I was in junior high here, I went to Central, and I did a drawing. It was of an eagle, but it was very colorful, and it was all different angles. Again, something completely different than what everybody else was doing. And my instructor, Mr. Grabowski, loved it and entered it in the Ferrandi art contest. And I think I won an honorable mention for it. And so that was kind of when I first started realizing, you know, that some recognition for, you know, what I could do. And then my sophomore year in high school, I took drawing and design at Bartlett, and Mr. Monaco was my instructor, and I learned more about art from him than probably any other teacher I ever had. He was a really accomplished artist, and I had an acrylic painting and a watercolor painting that were both entered in the Ferrandi art contest. And one won an honorable mention, and the watercolor actually sold for $25. And I was super jazzed. I mean, I had never sold any artwork before in my life. And I was so excited. And I still have that acrylic painting. And that was kind of when I was learning about different mediums, you know, that there was more than just drawing, you know, there was pastels and acrylic and oil paint, you know, and so my horizons were broadening artistically. And ironically enough, that watercolor painting, 40 years later, or at my 40th birthday party, my brother Kevin came up to visit, and he handed me his package from my parents, and it was that painting. They had bought it, and they had saved it. But what was amazing was they never hung it. I never knew that they had bought that painting.
Oh.
All those years. I cried when I saw it. I'm like, oh my God, you know. Really? So then later on, my senior year in high school, so we transferred to California. We moved out of Alaska. I was going to a private high school called Christian Brothers. And again, scholastically, I wasn't doing very good when we left here. I was kind of a jock and was focused on girls and working and football and stuff. And so I wasn't doing a whole lot scholastically, but I was doing pretty good with my art. So they put me in this all-boys school. Wasn't happy about it, but I was taking advanced art classes then, and I designed the Christmas card that went out to all the alumni and all the donors and stuff for Christian Brothers, which was kind of a big honor, you know. And I entered a couple of paintings in local art shows and stuff. So I was really kind of like feeling it. But then when I got into college, I took maybe one art class, but something about the college art, it seemed almost political to me. I didn't really jibe with the instructors. It felt like they had an agenda, you know, and it wasn't, you know, me growing as an artist. It was more them planting things in my head. And so I kind of rebelled against that, and I didn't really do anything in college with art. And when I moved back up here, I wanted to get back into it, and that's why I applied at Blaines. And the first winter that I was working at Blaines, I saw the snow sculptures for Ferrandi, and I'm like, oh, we got to do this. So I talked to all the staff, and I convinced them to join our carving team. And then I talked John, the owner, into sponsoring our team, which it was a $25 entry fee at the time, you know, big outlay. But so we had a team, and I was all excited, and I showed up out there, and I was the only one. Nobody else came in. And I worked like a fiend for an entire week, and it wasn't until I think maybe the fifth day, one or two of the people that had signed up for the team showed up and helped for a little while, but they weren't into it. They had no vision, but I was hooked. And it was the first sculpture I'd ever done, and I was competing. The guys at the time that were the team were called Three Dudes from Anchorage, and they were doing these amazing, elaborate, you know, realistic sculptures. And so they were my competition, and I think I placed third or fourth that year. But what was cool about it was the title of the piece was called Crystal Vision. And it was like this big eyeball on 4-post pedestal. And then I had gone in and hollowed out the inside, so it was completely hollow inside. So it was a ball suspended on 4 legs, and then I had carved faces all over on the inside of it. And from the outside, you just saw an eye, and you had to look inside the iris to see what was inside. There was a line like a quarter-mile long of people wanting to look inside that thing. So even though I didn't score huge, you know, place-wise, everybody was wanting to see that sculpture. Everybody was talking about it, and so I was hooked. And from then on, I carved every year for the next 10 or 12 years. Every single year and I competed in the 3-man division for a number of years, because the winner in the 3-man division, or 3-person division as it were, would go to the nationals and to represent Alaska. And so I really wanted to go to the nationals. And for whatever reason, we were always like second or third. I mean, we never got that first place finish, and it bothered me, you know. I was really wanting that, but I could never find 2 other people to carve with me that were as dedicated as I was, that wanted to work as hard and put in the time, because I was working a full-time job. I would go out there after work, and I would work all night long, you know, and it was cold, and you're wet, and you're tired, and, you know, it's not easy work. So I transitioned to solo carving, which you're doing all the work, but I didn't have any disappointment from somebody that wasn't pulling their weight. You know, it was just me against the snow. And when I went solo, I really started killing it. So I won first place, like 1995, I got my first place trophy. And I was so excited. And then in 98, I won first again. And then in 2000, I won first again. And so I was finally kind of like really hitting it. And even though I was still doing painting and, you know, I was painting in acrylic and oils, for some reason sculpture always just appealed to me. Something about it, the three-dimensionality of it. I would look at that big 8-foot by 8-foot square block of snow, and it was, I could see the sculpture inside of it. All I had to do was get everything else out of the way, and there it would be. And it was almost an instinctive thing, you know. I didn't train for it. It was just hardwired into my brain. These are miniatures. So these are sculptures that I did. They're miniatures of snow sculptures. So like that one that we won Best to Show on.
Oh.
This was the Sculpey. Sculpey clay. So
That's awesome.
So this was the model that I made before we carved. And the bear turned out quite a bit different than that, but I actually like this bear better than the one I carved. It looks more bear-like, but the bear that I did in the carving looks fat. It's an obese bear. And then this one was the model that I did for the 75th anniversary of the railroad. And that sculpture turned out exactly like the model. Mm-hmm. I mean, this thing is spot on. I was pretty proud of that one. Of course, they paid me to be off for a week to do nothing but carve.
That's
so
awesome.
This is the model from when we went to the Nationals. She lost one of her mittens. And she's gotten kind of beat up over the years, but yeah, these are the miniatures.
Those are cool. I didn't know you had those.
Yeah, I kept them around. Do you remember, what the hell was that stuff called? It was made by Crayola. It's like styrofoam, feel that?
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't weigh nothing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I didn't train for it. It was just hardwired into my brain. And even the Metal Man out there, when I started working on the Metal Man, I literally collected junk from inside rail cars at the railroad, these gondola cars that would come from scrap yards and stuff. They'd be full of all this loose scrap, metal, whatever. And while I was working, I'd see things and I'd be like, oh, that's an arm or that's a whatever. I'd see body parts and I'd chuck them out of the car and I'd take them home with me. And I built up this huge, amassed all this metal pile. And then Travis and I would get together and drink beer and I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. And he would just sit there and look at me and go, how do you see that from that? Like, I don't know. It's just there, So that's how the Metal Man got started. But I really enjoy painting. I don't get as much joy out of it as sculpture, but as I've gotten a little bit older, I'm wanting to get back into that. So,
Tell me about a couple of your favorite paintings that you've done.
Wow. It's funny because so many of my paintings over the years I've given away, either as gifts or just, people said, "Oh, I like that." And I'm like, "Oh, you like it? You want it?" You know what I mean? I never thought about being an artist professionally. I always thought I wasn't good enough, that I could never make a living, selling artwork. And Don Kolstad used to always encourage me. He's like, "David, you need to just paint. Why aren't you painting? You should be painting. You're good at it. Just do it." And I'm like, "Don, I don't think I can make a living. Who cares?" It's like, and I've always respected Don for that he just dropped everything and just went after his painting. I've never been that courageous, I guess, or, where I felt like I could feed myself, off of my artwork. But one of my favorite paintings is a portrait that I did of my mother. And it probably wasn't even my best painting, but when I started working on it, it wasn't long after she had passed away, and it was really, it meant a lot to me personally. I think my windmill painting is one of my faves. And the painting I did a few years ago it was supposed to be a plein air piece, but I didn't have time, so I just took some photographs, and it was of a junker old truck down in Hope. And I don't know why, it was one that just really, I think I nailed it. And I think the title was Forgotten Friend. Just the old beater truck just sitting there in the woods, rusting away, but I've always been drawn to old rusty metal stuff, so. But it's funny how, when you're a creative type, you create. And this is one of the reasons why Blaines has always done well through thick and thin. Doesn't matter what the economy is doing. Blaines has always stayed strong because creators create, artists create. It doesn't matter what the economy is doing. It doesn't matter whether your artwork sells or not. You just do it. In my former life, when I lived in Sacramento, I worked at a spice factory. It was called Professional Food Flavors. And it was a big production facility. We mixed seasonings for pre-prepared meats. We did stuff for Foster Farm and Gehring and all these other Armour and stuff. So they all had these formula cards, and they were really top secret, and because it was their proprietary formula. And so that's what we did. And most of the spice seasonings, we would mix oleo resins that would be mixed in with, the dextrose and the ground mustard and all the other stuff. And the oleo resin was usually red or orange, and they were just concentrated spices, really. Well, the buckets that we would put them in sometimes would drip, or they would have stuff on them. And the table where we weighed out everything and prepared stuff was always covered with white butcher paper. And the oleo resins, you would get these drops of oil on the paper, and I would look at them and I would see pictures. I would see faces, I'd see animals. So when I wasn't doing something else, I'd grab a pen, because we always had Sharpie markers and stuff, and I would draw around the oil spots and draw pictures. And the people I worked with are like, "You're nuts, Haag," And I'm like, "Well, like, how do you see these things in just an oil spot?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It's just there." And so the guys I worked with took to cutting them out. So, because we would have to change the paper out every week. And the guys started cutting out my pictures and hanging them up on a bulletin board, all these different pictures that I had done. And it just was natural, you know. And I always thought it was kind of odd that like the people I worked with thought I was crazy, or they were like, how do you see these things? And I'm like, how do you not? I mean, it just seemed so natural as breathing, you know. So I think you're born an artist. It's either in you or it isn't. And even though I haven't made a career out of being an artist, I've been an artist my whole life. I've always created. Regardless of what. Found objects, driftwood, metal, paint, whatever. If there's something that I can, you know, pump creative life into, I'll do it. So that's me as an artist.
That is awesome.
This tree was in a life and death struggle with another tree. So this tree was literally growing in a spiral around another spruce tree. And what ended up happening is both trees got killed by spruce bark beetles. And so this thing was in this death grip around the other tree. So I actually had to use a sledgehammer to separate them. So you could see where it was, I mean, these smooth sides where it was growing around it. And that's what all these were all from the beetle larvae that ultimately killed them. But so after I harvest this, I'm like, oh, I want to make a base. Boom, boom, boom. So this rubber band is just, I needed to see, once I stretched it, where it would go, you know? So now that I know how it's going to work, now so I went to Guitar City, and I'm asking them about giant bass springs, and they're like, they gave me a couple of websites to go to because I need big, huge bass strings to string this, but my brother, who is a musician, I'm not a musician, but Kevin said, if you can build it, if you can put strings on it, he said, I can hook it up to it and record whatever sound it makes. So I'm hoping this makes a really deep bass sound when we hook it up. It's like an electric guitar, basically.
Tell me about your hopes for the future.
What's that?
Hopes for the future.
Well, my hopes for the future have gotten much less grandiose. I hope for good health, happiness. As you know, I've recently met someone, and Vicki and I are doing great together, and I'm excited about, what our future is going to be. But yeah, I'm keeping it pretty down to earth, I'm looking forward to, so you can't really tell now because everything in my whole yard is covered with 5 feet of snow, but I love to do landscape work too. That, to me, it's kind of like a natural canvas. And so I'm looking forward to landscaping the house in Idaho. I'm excited about that. And the thing is basically like anything, when I kind of go into it, I don't really have a plan for what I want it to look like. What it's going to look like is going to be based on what I see when I get there. Once the house is built, I'll get a vision, I'll get a picture of what it's supposed to look like, and then I'll move everything out of the way, and then it'll look like that. So that's kind of the way this yard was. It's been over the years. I'll never forget the day that I had 15 tons of rock delivered to the driveway. Renee was in bed, and the dump truck backed up the driveway and dumped his bed, and the whole house shook. And Renee was like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I'm like, relax. I have a plan, And then I lined all the yard, all the lawn is lined with rocks because I like that natural it's a natural transition from the kind of groomed, manicured lawn to the woods, which are basically wild. But I didn't want to put a fence or a bender board, or I didn't want to put something man-made. I wanted it to be something natural. So I like to work with the land to find a natural but visually appealing, that, I don't know. Landscaping is fun to me. It's a lot of work, but it's kind of like a big sculpture. So, but it's kind of weird because I don't have any kids, and Renee and I tried to have kids, and she wasn't able to have kids, and that's okay. I mean, I'm a uncle 10 times over, and I'm good with that. But it does, when I get that long look at my life, it's harder to find meaning, It's harder to, decide what my place in the world is. It's so much easier if you have children because that, they're your prodigy. That's who, you're passing everything down to, and that's, you live on through them, so to speak. And not having that, you have to work a little harder, to figure out why you're here and what it all means. And in many ways, I mean, I kind of looked at you as like a daughter I never had, and you make me proud every day. Because I know that you have a good heart, and I know how much it means to you. So seeing you, as you've progressed and moving into this position as owner of Blaines, I get a lot of joy out of that, and a lot of satisfaction. I'm trying not to get emotional. Really means a lot to me personally. Thank you. So when I come back up to visit and see how you're doing, that's going to mean a lot. So,
yeah.
And of course, you'll have to come down and see what I'm working on at some point. But I don't know. I take it one day at a time. I stopped trying to predict the future a long time ago. I've had to deal with a lot of loss, and it definitely changes your perspective, and the things that I used to think were important aren't as important, and things that I hadn't even considered, I'm taking a long look at. So I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'm excited to see what it is. Mm-hmm. I'm a work in progress. I think we all are. And I don't think you ever stop learning. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and who's retired, and he says to me, he goes, now that I'm retired, he says, I spend a lot of time thinking about, the jobs that I've worked, and, people that I had worked with, and the things that happened, and, what that means and everything. And I kind of looked at him and I went, wow, that's weird, because I'm not doing that at all. I'm looking at what's ahead. I'm looking at what I'm going to do next. I'm excited for it, I know I have more years behind me than ahead of me, but that doesn't mean I can't be excited about what's ahead of me, As long as I can keep my health, then that's the most important thing, As you know, today's the anniversary of my younger brother's passing, and it was funny because this morning my phone started lighting up because my family, we have a group text that we communicate on, and I sent out a text to him, and I said, I just love that that even though we're scattered all over the country, that we still all communicate together as a family. I said, this group text has basically turned into our kitchen table, where we used to all sit around and talk about everything. And the fact that we're still able to do that, I think is awesome. And my dad's still in on it too, because my pop is still alive, God bless him. He just turned 85, so that to me is reason enough to be happy, Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll never know why it was necessary for Renee to get sick and die. I don't know why. I just assume that, God called her home because her work here was done. And I'm still here because I still have work to do. And I don't know exactly what that is, but I'm willing to find out. Just want to buy a house?
Maybe. This house is amazing.
Well, it's a great place.
Oh,
Time out.
it is. Okay, yeah. I think that's a good timeout.
It's a good time for a break.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Dave's story. Thank you so much, Dave, for sharing. And I can't wait to see you all in the store soon.
It was pretty cool, though, when I saw John at Renee's funeral, and he said, the best thing I ever did was hire Renee.
Oh, that's sweet.
Or he said, the best decision I ever made was to hire Renee.
Yeah.
And that was in 1986. So, that was pretty cool. And I said, well, I agree, because if you hadn't, I never would have met her.
Right. Oh, that's awesome.
I have a lot of unfinished works. So this one was like, one of those little playground things. This was up near Healy when I did the Michelle Usabelli workshop. Same with this one. This was plein air with Don Kolstad, I think. Portage. This was learning how to do birch trees in autumn. Mm-hmm. Learning how to do spruce trees in winter. Ooh. This was in when I was taking classes with Deanne Haste, and this gal came and sat for us a couple of times. So this drill is to drill holes through this so that I can bolt this down. This thing is called the Harvest. Oh, wait a minute, this goes on this one, I think. Was it that one? No, I think. So I haven't decided yet how this is going to go, but so as you can see, I have other pieces here, and so I think the original plan was for this to go something like this. So, but I haven't painted or stained that one yet. But this one's called the Harvest. Very cool. But it's again, it's a work in progress, and you know, I get started on these things, you know, and I get to them when I have time. A lot of these are projects that I'm either waiting to do something else with. So these are some of my ice carving tools. So I had handmade. I would make my own carving tools for snow sculpture. Mm-hmm. So these are smoothers, concave. This was just an ice cream scoop, but I had to cut the back of it out so that when I was scraping with it, it could, you know, it would go away. This is another one, like a gouge for making holes and stuff. But so these are ice carving tools, and these are made specifically for ice carving, and they're quite a bit different than snow sculpture tools. These things are made in Japan. This is folded steel that's razor sharp. This one isn't that sharp anymore because I've beaten the living piss out of it working on stuff. But and I mean, this saw is still razor sharp. So these are made for ice.
I think you spent the perfect amount of time on everything, and you transitioned. What was so funny about it to me was I would have the thought, oh, we should move to this, and then you would have, you like would say it like right afterwards, like 2 or 3 times. It was
a good transitioner.
Yeah, yeah, that was awesome.
Well, I can't believe I